Okay, we're going to take a look at this adding of fractions. We're going to look at a couple of different strategies because when I read this problem and I look at these fractions here and it says best estimate, that I might want to do some rounding. I could add all these together, but don't forget, in order to add fractions you must have a common denominator. If I notice that these two have a common denominator, you could put those together first. But I'm going to do an estimated answer as well as we go. 6 and 1/8. 1/8 is not very large, so we're going to round this 6 and 1/8 to just the number 6. If I do it to this first one, I'm going to do it to the second one. But when I look at the 3 and 5/16, 5/16 is almost one whole more. So we're going to round that number to 4. And I'm just going to round my whole numbers, add my whole numbers together to see what I get. So I have 12 plus 4 more, and I'm getting a number that is close to 16. So now I'm going to actually do the math by adding common denominators first. I end up with 12 and 2/8. And now I want to add on to it 3 and 15/16. But I can't do that until I make this fraction equivalent to something out of 16 to find my common denominator. So I'm going to multiply by 2 and I get 4/16. So these two fractions are what I want to add together. When I do that, it only takes one more to make it 6/16. If I have 6/16, that is equivalent to one whole. So when I add my one whole and trade out and change that 6/16 to one whole, I have 3/16 left over, and I add my whole numbers together, which 13, 14, 15, 16. So as an estimation 16 and as an actual 16 and 3/16 is still not very large, that my best answer is still just 16 inches. So whether you estimate or do the actuals, you should come up with 16 inches altogether. Let's take another look at working with fractions and decimals. I'm going to look at this problem up here that requires a little bit of extra thinking because I have a complex problem. I am looking at that we have soap, which is 2 2/3, and a half cup of bleach. But this is for each bucket. As I read on, I notice that we're going to have 6 buckets at the car wash, and I want to know what the total is. So let's first find the total of one bucket. So when I add 2 and 2/3 and add on 1/2, before I can add fractions, I must have a common denominator. As I find this common denominator, it's going to be 6 because that is a number they both have in common. You can say 2 times 3 is 6 to get that common denominator. But now we need to make these equivalent fractions. 1/2 out of 6 is 3 out of 6. 2/3 multiplying by 2 is going to be 4 out of 6. When I add my numerators together, I get 7, 6. When I add my whole numbers, I have 2 and 7 out of 6. Now, this is improper and I need to change it to a mixed. How can I do that? By dividing out 7 divided by 6, which is 1 and 1/6. But don't forget, we're going to add that on to our 2. So we end up with 3 and 1/6. Now, that's just for one bucket. Now I need to find out what it is for 6 buckets. If I just take my whole number here and do a little bit of estimating and multiply it by my 6 buckets, what is 6 times 3? Well, that's 18. But we have a little bit more here, so when I look at my answers for reasonableness, could it be 9? Could it be 8? Could it even be 16? Because 6 times 3 is 18. It can't be anything less than 18. So we're going to say it's a little bit more, which is 19 whole, and use some good, reasonable estimating skills. Now let's take a look at this last problem down here. In this particular problem, it's a multi-step problem. I'm noticing that I have 2.5 pounds for each, and I have apples, pears, bananas, oranges. And then I have 1/4 of a pound each for grapes, strawberries, and blueberries. So in considering this, I have 2.5 for 4 pieces of fruit. And I have 1.25 for 3 additional pieces of fruit. And it tells me I want the total cost. I'm not actually having to work this out, but I want the process that is needed in order to work it out. Right here, if I have 4 fruits that each cost 2.5, or each fruit that is weighing 2.5 pounds, then I need to multiply these two numbers together. So I'm going to look for that in my problem, and I see that right here, multiplying. And then I have 3 fruits that each are 1.25 pound. And again, we would want each one to be 1.25, so we multiply. What would I do next? I would want to put these two answers, if I work them out together, to get the total pounds that I'm going to be using. And then there's one last step, because each one cost $2 each, that when I get my total pounds, I can then multiply this whole answer of this, right here, my total, times my $2 each. We would not want to add them together because they each weigh something different. We can't multiply these two numbers together and then add on the product. And of course, we can't add these together and then just add on the product either. Notice that these words down here is multiply the sum, multiply the sum, multiply the product, all look the same. It's the beginning part that we need to make sure that we're doing correctly first to get A as our best answer.